So in front of you, this is our scheme of work for section C of the product design AQA A-level. So section C is all about designing, and the top marks you can achieve are 19 to 25. And this is a band that I want us to be looking at, because even if you're sat there thinking, I can't achieve this, at the end of the day, as long as you know what they're actually asking you or asking you for, I don't see why not personally. So we'll go through each part, each bullet point, and actually summarize it and dissect what are they actually looking for. So first one. The rationale for design decisions is clearly documented and fully justified, with constant reference being made to the design brief, specification, and investigations throughout the development of their design proposal. So what does this mean? It means the following. Make clear notes to previous research. Any research you have done, we need to prove that this was relevant. You didn't just do this for lols, you did this for a purpose. And this is you putting that purpose into practice. So it's reflecting back on your product analysis, if you did a mood board of existing products, client research, that's really important that you reflect back on that and identifying the needs and wants of your client, as well as the overall brief and specification that you might still be in the process of writing in regards to specification. That's fine, because this is going to give you ideas to help add to that. But you need to link back to these elements to show that they are relevant, but also to show that you're on the right path and that your product will hopefully be successful. Next one. In the development of innovative design proposals, the student will demonstrate clear evidence of originality, creativity, and a willingness to take design risks. Don't be afraid to try something, even if you don't know what it is or how it will work. Put it down on paper, turn it into a model. Just because you don't know how something is going to be doesn't mean you can't think of it, because at the end of the day, you will get more marks for being creative. Now, I'm not saying design, say that you're going to have jetpack boots or anti-gravity defying elements to your design, because come on now, that's really unrealistic. We need them to be realistic, but at the same time, if there's maybe a certain motion or movement or mechanism that you want your design to have, but you just don't know how it's going to work, doesn't matter, sketch it down. We can work that out in the development. Maybe it's a material that you're not really aware of, but you've heard of it, but you don't know if you can actually cut it or shape it or whatever. Doesn't matter, jot it down, because as you develop these design ideas, as you start to look at how to improve them, this is where you can then do more research to help solidify whether that is actually possible. So don't be afraid to be creative and original and different. And the other thing about that is, you don't just have to come up with something that's brand new. All right, it doesn't have to be necessarily a brand new concept. It could be maybe you're using materials in a completely different way, something that they hasn't been done before, or something that isn't done often. So maybe you're working with it and manipulating it in a different way. Maybe it's joining two completely different materials together. Maybe it's using a manufacturing process that's dedicated to timbers on polymers or on metals. It's just going against the norm. And if you're not sure on how to do that, research. YouTube is fantastic for this kind of stuff. See what people are doing at home in their own garages or in their own sheds. What are they using materials to do and why? Also, do some more product analysis, but don't necessarily write stuff down. Just look at what exists already in the world. Just think to yourself, how can I improve that, or how can I make that bit different? Excellent use of a variety of modelling techniques to support ongoing development work throughout. This is supported by the use of drawing, sketching, annotations and notes showing clear evidence of design thinking. Make models of your most preferred design. Use cardboard, use card, use paper, use MDF, use foam, but also modelling techniques. You can use an element of CAD/CAM here. You can also, and this links to the following point that I'm going to read through in a minute, you can also get client feedback and testing as well. So modeling techniques is basically how you get your ideas from off paper and then maybe into a physical form. But this relates to CAD/CAM because maybe you want to create a 3D visual representation of your product, which you can move around in a 360-degree view. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm saying that is a form of modelling technique. Excellent ongoing development of design proposals achieved through exploration of and experimentation with different materials, techniques, and processes, leading to an excellent quality design of a prototype for manufacture. Once you feel comfortable with the design, it's time to start making small parts of it out of different materials and using different manufacturing methods. And for each of these things that you're going to do, you want to test them, whether that's physically, visually, or get some client feedback, some peer feedback. You want to test them out as much as you can, because you need to know if these are actually going to work. You need to know if these ideas that you've just come up with and that you've just improved using these different materials and manufacturing methods are actually going to be successful. And you won't know until you try. You won't know until you test them out. So again, that could be visual testing, you're just visually assessing it, physical testing, or peer testing. Ask people around you, ask your client, do you like this? Is this suitable? What would you change about it? Comprehensive and fully detailed manufacturing specification produced, which makes specific reference to relevant quality control checks and allows fully accurate interpretation by a third party. So what this means is once you've got the design that you want to make and you've developed it as far as you can go, you're going to create a very clear parts list. So every part that is required to make this product, you're going to write it down, draw it out, label it, put it in a table, whatever you need to do. But every part needs to be documented with the size, the material, the thickness, and the quantities. And you're also going to produce some steps of quality control. So as you're making this, or as you expect someone to make it for you, what do they need to look out for? Do they need to make sure that two components fit together? Do they need to do the old visual assessment for smooth edges and splinters, cracks if you're drilling into acrylic, things like that? Because the idea of this manufacturing specification page is that you can hand it to any manufacturer and they'll be able to make it for you. And they can't do that if they don't know the size of the pieces. So that's your first port of call. You will create a lovely, clear document that says all the different parts and their sizes, and then the quality controls. Project management for manufacturing allows for further development of design proposals in response to ongoing evaluation, testing, and full consideration of contingency planning as prototype development takes place. Evaluate everything. What is good about it? What is bad about it? How can you improve it? What are the limitations? What could slow you down? Or actually, now that you've gone from having a sketch in front of you to having a model in front of you, actually, you know what? Now I've got this physical thing in my hands that I'm visually assessing and physically testing. I don't think I've got the time to actually make it. Because that's the thing, we have to be realistic. We need to make sure that what we want to do is feasible. It can actually happen, be successful, and that includes time limit. So sometimes it might be actually with the time frame you have, you might have to simplify your final concept, the design that you want to make, because you haven't got the timing to do it. You might have to simplify parts of it or focus on making just one element of it, not the entire thing, but one element of it really well. Also, client feedback is also fantastic for testing. I know I've said it before and I'll say it again. You are making something for a specific person, and that person is going to be the ultimate judge as to whether this is successful or not, whether they're happy with what you've done for them. So don't be afraid to consistently nag them and say, look, are you happy with this so far? Do you think this is suitable? Do you have any other ideas that you might want to throw at me at this point? Consistently go back to your client and ask for feedback, and just jot it down on the pages, because this is where you're also going to get those marks, because it shows that you're not forgetting that person, that you're still having them in mind, as well as still linking back to all that previous research that we mentioned on one of the very first bullet points for this scheme. So what on earth does all this stuff look like? It's all good and well, me reading through a mark scheme and saying, this is what you need to do, that's what you need to do as well. but what does it actually look like? What are the expectations? So I want to show you just a couple pages, not many. Actually, no, that's a lie. There's quite a few. But I want to show you what some good pages look like, but most importantly, why they are good pages. And this is one of the first ones I want to show you first of all, because I feel that it looks quite minimal. There's not a great, well, no, let me retract. It looks like there's not much going on here. We've got some really clear, beautifully sketched and rendered, because there's some tone going on there, not just background colour, but some tone, beautiful designs. But the reason I've chosen this as, you know, what a good one looks like is because they've been sketched really, really crystal clear through the use of pencil and then outlining in pen. So I can see that whatever this thing is, to me, it looks like it's either going to go on the ground or it's going to stick into the ground just by looking at the images straight away. They're clear, well drawn, and they also suggest things like movement and how components slot together. It's a lovely, beautifully detailed first concept page. So these are just the first design ideas that they have. And yeah, they do look fairly similar. Let's be honest, they look fairly similar, but that's okay because this is just page one. There are other pages that led on from this where the shape's completely changed. And actually that's really quite nice to do. It's good to show your first initial thoughts, even if you're not confident with them. Show your first initial thoughts, because then as they develop and they get better and better and better, not only is it great for the examiner to see, but it's also good for you to see as well your progression and your successes as you go. This is also a really good page because all of these annotations talk about what the product is, the function, and what it's supposed to do. And that links beautifully to their client that they've chosen as well as their design brief. This is one of the annotations that I've enlarged so you can actually read it and see it on the page. And I'm going to read through it and then I'm going to tell you why I think it's a really beautiful example of an annotation. This design is based off of a bow stand which could be adapted to also hold arrows. One problem with this is that the arrow holder may interfere with the placement of the bow. As well as this, the addition of extra features like the score sheet holder would be difficult to fit onto this design as it is so compact. This is a beautiful annotation. It links to the brief, even though it doesn't say this meets my brief, because it links to the brief because it does what it says on the tin. In the brief, they said that they were going to make an arrow holder with additional functions. Boom, it is an arrow holder with additional functions. But the reason I really like this annotation is because as you're reading it, immediately you go to the one problem with this is that they've identified a limitation, they've identified a disadvantage of this, and that is the fact that this is going to be such a small, compact product. It's not going to be able to hold those additional features. Doesn't mean it's a bad design, doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad design idea, but what it does mean is that there's opportunity to improve upon this. So immediately it shows me, the person who's going to mark this, it shows me that they are recognizing those limitations straight away, and that as the product develops, it gives me the sense that actually, do you know what, I think it's actually going to get far bigger in size because it needs to hold everything that they mentioned at the beginning. It says a lot in just a short little statement, and that's why I think it's a good annotation. For this piece of work, I wanted to show you a little bit about creativity and uniqueness and innovation. So these designs are really quite modern. The product is to hold bottles of wine and glasses. So the product idea is storage. And to make it more innovative and more creative, they just thought more about how it would look. They wanted the aesthetics to look quite creative and different, which I think they've done that. It really does look creative and different. You wouldn't expect to see necessarily a wine storage or glass holder like these, because normally they're quite rustic and quite traditional. So this is kind of going against that normal grain, but it's also at the function of which it actually works. So I like the bottom right design here because the concept here is that you turn the dial and that the holders, the storage, will actually eject or extrude outwards. It's a really interesting concept. Might not work because when you put the bottles in, it's going to be really quite heavy, and actually does someone have that amount of dexterity to twist that? a dial wouldn't actually be easy. It would need to be some kind of lever. But these are all things that they could investigate from this concept and this design. Is creative, and it's a little bit different, and it worked really, really well. And they weren't afraid to just put that idea onto paper, even though they weren't very sure of it. This one as well, I want to point out for creativity as well, because when you look at it, it doesn't look that different. It's some kind of storage that goes onto a bike, clearly, because you've got the bikes on the page here. But the way they tried to be creative and different here was how the product actually, the structure of the product and how it folded, so how it was stored. So if you look at this image over here and over here, the way they approached this was they wanted it to be a bag that was easily accessible, had to go on a bike for a messenger or someone who goes on really long trips, rides to schools, but they also wanted it to be stored for convenience. So they started to think about, right, I want it to be this bag, but I want it to collapse. It also needs to be stable, because if it's just a textile bag, it's going to be floppy. It's going to have no structure. The products might damage. So they thought about adding this kind of like polymer infrastructure to go not only on the inside but the outside as well, which can then help it to fold down when it's no longer in use. We did some research. I say we. They did some research. They didn't find a bag that was necessarily like that. So there you go. That's an element of innovation. That's an element of difference. Yes, there might be one somewhere, but they couldn't find it in their research. And then they justified that. They went back to that and they wrote that down and said, you know, upon my research, I could not find this product. Therefore, I think it's suitable. I think it's in demand, and I think it is creative. And that's fine to say that. And then finally, the next few pages are all from the same project, and I wanted to show you a bit more about the flow, because it's all good and well getting your concepts onto paper, but where do you go from there? So this project was about storage facilities for double stacking books, so that the books that were at the back of the stack could be easily accessible, not only so you could read the titles, but you know what books you've actually got. So they've thought here about how they can make those back books more accessible by adding an additional component to the shelf. And they've sketched those ideas down, and that's what this page represents. This is their very first design idea page. Beautifully sketched, lots of annotations to explain the function clearly. What they then went to do, and this is all within section C still, they then went to develop on that idea by creating a cardboard prototype, which they could then physically test. So they physically tested the movement, because bottom left you can see the back part of this product extended. So what they did was they put it onto an existing shelf that we had in the workshop, and they gave it a go. They saw if they could extend it easily. Didn't work very well. That's okay. They looked at how they can make it bigger or perhaps smaller in size, make it more accessible. They added a little lip for ergonomics. All of this came about just through that physical testing. And as their design idea started to become more strong, they identified the limitations, they identified the problems, and they improved them. They started to talk about how the product could actually be manufactured, and the techniques they'd want to use, the materials they'd want to use, and why. They thought of other mechanisms that they could use as well. It's a really strong development page. And then what they went on to do, they evaluated the prototype in far more depth by getting not only client research, but they took the prototype home, because they were making it for a product in their own home, a bookcase in their own home, and they tested it there. They did some more prototype development through Sketch, which you could see here on the right hand side. And then what they did, they started to develop it more by looking at the mechanisms that they wanted to use to make this product function. And I'm not talking you through it all, because I could be here for hours. As much as I'd love to, I could be here for days. But this is how their project has flowed. They had their sketched initial concepts, they made a prototype, they tested it, they found the successes of it, and now they want to develop those successes. And in this case, it was how the product actually moved from off the bookshelf to the front, so that the books at the back could be reviewed. And that's exactly what this page here, mechanism development. They've got their design idea, they're pretty certain this is what they want it to look like. Now they've got to start developing what it's actually going to do and how it's actually going to work. And that is why it's a really good page, and this is why it was a really good portfolio, was because it flowed really, really well, and they consistently concluded and evaluated all of their work by adding these little summary boxes, their little exploded diagrams of the possibilities. Yes, the sketches are beautifully drawn, but it's these things here. I know they're difficult to read, but it's the annotations that justify their choices. And even on this page, they still talk about limitations. They still talk about, I'm not entirely sure what materials I want to use at this point. I need to then go on to do some material testing, which is what they did. Okay, so I know that is a lot to take on board, and you're probably sat there thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot. It is a lot, but it's not. You have to sit and do it all at once in one go. Use your time effectively. Give yourself a prioritized list of what you need to do, and hopefully that will help you make good pace and progress. I wish I could tell you, right, you need to do this, you need to do that. Oh, and also make sure everybody has this on their page. But I can't really, because every project will always have its own element of personality and element of uniqueness. So as much as I'd love to say, oh, go research mechanisms, it won't relate to everybody. So it's just trying to find your own path and I know it sounds very cliche, but your own journey for this project, because that's what it is. It's yours, it's your own, and you've got to take some independence and responsibility for it. But if you're ever unsure of what to do or what to add on anything, think about, who are you making this for? What actually is this thing you're doing, and why have you done what you've done so far? Think of those things in regards to annotations, but also what you've got to do next. Because if you answer those questions, who, what, and why, sometimes you'll think, actually, no, I'm not entirely sure why that needs to do that, or actually, I'm not entirely sure what this part actually is, and that will help you to plan some further research. Because research is ongoing. You're never going to stop researching. Even when you think you've finished researching, there's always going to be something that you go, oh, I need to research that. Whether that's materials, finishes, paints, people, whatever, anthropometric data, whatever. There'll always be something that you need to add in lastminute.com. And then finally, to help you with this section and what you need to do, a little thing to help you as well. Sketch, test, improve. Always think about that. You're getting these ideas from your head onto paper. Quick sketch first. Test it, whether it's through a prototype or through even more sketching, asking for feedback, whatever. And then take all of the results from that testing and then improve it however you can. Really hope you found this useful, and you know what? Enjoy it. Honestly, enjoy it, because this is such a freeing project, and I sincerely hope you are enjoying your own little learning journey.